Hi there. Thank you for joining me today for this session titled Zooming Your Way to Success. My name is Emily Gottenborg, and hopefully I can teach you a few tips and tricks about how to communicate in our new virtual world. So this session was precipitated out of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, and a large shift towards moving many of our communication into virtual platforms, including meetings, teaching sessions, and of course, interviewing for jobs and fellowships. So we are in an entirely unprecedented time where for the first time our graduating class of residents will likely pursue many of their applications and interviews via a virtual platform. And we want to be able to best prepare you for success in that forum. So with that, our goals for today are to think about those best practices. And I will disclose to you that, of course, we are out of an evidence-based medicine world. We all love a good evidence-based medicine talk. Unfortunately, we are paving new directions and we might not have as much data at our fingertips to access. But what I'm sharing with you is what we've learned as a leadership group and as a residency class thinking about how to communicate in these settings. I also want to give you some tips and tricks, again, that we've come up with from the group. And all of these will hopefully guide your next session when you're actually going to practice some mock interviews, solidifying these skills. These will be done on a virtual platform, and you can practice all the things that we're about to talk about. So with that, um, disclosure, I am by no means a Zoom expert. I am solely sharing what I learned in the past few months experiencing this pandemic with you. I have certainly been known to break these rules. I will likely break some of these rules and best practices during the next 20 minutes. Feel free to observe them and notice them, and we will call that the activity for the session for now. So please challenge me to point out where I've broken these rules. So let's start at a high level. Why do we interview? Now, this is not rocket science. I think you are all very well aware that we interview for a few different reasons. You want to prove that you're a fit for the position, and that vice versa, that the position is a really good match for you and what your goals are. You want to show people how interested you are, how engaged and excited you are about the opportunity, and to showcase your communication skills. So, why is this different in our world of virtual interviewing or Zoom interviewing? Well, let's start with proving you're a fit for the position. In the world where we can fly across the country and show up in a new city with our CVs in hand, ready to talk about our research, our QI projects, it might be much easier to find the people that you connect with, the people that might share a research interest or a scholarly interest with you. You can seek them out, shake their hand, talk about your shared interests. On a Zoom platform, that might be much more difficult in prearranged interview slots. Furthermore, proving that the position is the right fit for you. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I often go to a new city or a new program or a new job, and I get that gut feeling. I like the people, I like the culture, I like the way that I feel when I'm in this place and doing this work, the sounds and the smells of the city and the type of food and this area, the neighborhood that I'm going to be living in. This is hard to do slash impossible when you're in a virtual setting. So how can you get that same sense when you're communicating in a virtual platform? What about expressing your interest? It might seem pretty easy actually to show how interested you are in, say, UCSF when you take the time off of work, you take 2 valuable vacation days, you spend $1,000 to schlep across the country to put on your fancy suit to do an exhausting day full of meeting people. That's pretty easy to show. I am here, I am interested, sign me up for this job. In a virtual platform, it's much easier to click a few buttons, say yes to every interview, apply more broadly because it can be just as easy as that. A simple click, you're not spending lots of money or taking lots of time off work to show that interest. So again, what are some ways that we can showcase that in different strategies? And finally, you want to showcase your communication skills. Again, you guys are all phenomenal communicators. You've been mastering that skill for the last 3 years. But how do you communicate when you can't show up and shake someone's hand? You can't make eye contact. You don't know whether to look at the video or the slide or the person on your screen. It can be really difficult to show those communication skills. So with that, virtual communication can be incredibly challenging. We know that it's mentally exhausting. And why is that? Why is it so mentally exhausting to do this simply with a camera in front of your face? And that's because when you're in person, you can much more easily pick up on the normal social cues, the body language, the way people are messaging to you. It feels natural and your brain sort of wires things correctly. But when there's a screen in front of you and many, many miles often in front of you, it's harder to make those connections, and your brain has to work that much harder to process the same body language, the same words, the same way of structuring a sentence. So it's exhausting. And there can be some issues with the normal communication strategies. So in a normal setting, I might politely pause to ask a question or to answer a question, and that feels like a good strategy. On a virtual platform, silence can actually be really confusing for people, and it can actually cause anxiety. So studies have shown, and this is one of my only studies that I will be able to quote in this session, that a silence break of 1.2 seconds, it's about that long, can actually cause this sense of unfriendliness, or even worse, potentially, anxiety that there's been a tech malfunction. Did the internet go out? Did my call drop? What happened there? Or was that just a normal communication strategy? So it can be hard to interpret things. And then finally, it requires a lot of energy because you are acutely aware that you are performing. Right now, I can see my face in the screen in the corner, and I know that I'm on camera, I'm being recorded, I am essentially on stage. That's exhausting, and you might not feel that way in an in-person session. So it can be very challenging. So what can we do? How can we actually set ourselves up for success in this time where we are acknowledging that it's not an ideal state for an interview for a job? So I'm going to go through these four strategies rather. We're going to talk about the scene, preparing yourself, considering what you actually want to talk about, and then the ever important troubleshooting. So let's dive in. I don't know if you saw the headline about the CEO in the UK, I believe, who turned herself into a potato for a company-wide meeting. She led the entire meeting as a potato because she couldn't figure out how to turn the filter off, and she just had to roll with it. I think we can all agree that this is not ideal. I think sometimes it's harder to suss out what an appropriate scene is. Is it okay to have the San Francisco Bridge in the background? Is it okay to be in my bedroom? What is a nice scene that exemplifies, I am here, I am excited, I want to do this job? So let's talk about that. I'm going to give you a challenge. What is wrong with this picture? And there's probably many things wrong with this picture. So I'm first going to highlight that you might not actually be able to see what's wrong with this picture. It's a little bit dark and hazy, a very common mistake on virtual platforms. People haven't adjusted their lighting, and you actually get a very hazy sense of what's going on, who the person is behind the screen. So let me brighten this up for you. And oh goodness, that did not help our case whatsoever. So with that in mind, as you guys start looking around and picking out the do not do's, I'm going to highlight some of them for you. So I'll start with the background. Now you might, if you are a well-trained eye, notice there's a bottle of Tito's back there, vodka, a bottle of tequila, there's some booze bottles around. That certainly doesn't need to be showcased in a professional interview setting. That shouldn't be the first thing your eye gets drawn to in an interview. Right next to it, you'll notice a pile of dirty plates that I clearly didn't have time to put away or clean up. We don't need to showcase all of our bad habits, that's for sure. I'll bring you up a bit. The head and the heart, the last concert that I went to in San Francisco. Concert posters, very cool as a decor strategy, but potentially not what your interviewer needs to see as a first thing. A few other things you might notice, I'm a bit distracted. I've got all these children around, and they certainly don't look like they're being quiet and helpful. They're bopping around, being noisy or grumpy and requiring my attention. Again, I'm not ready to be engaged in this interview. A few more things. EMS 118 has joined the conference. You probably know that at least on the Zoom platform, you have the opportunity to have a screen name so that people know who has entered the meeting. So most people probably don't need to know that my high school friends called me Ems and that my birthday is January 18th, as this was my AOL AIM screen name from 1997, I believe. So this is your opportunity to highlight a professional name, i.e. your name, Emily Gottenborg. You could even highlight where you're from as a reminder to your interviewee so that it pops up, Emily Gottenborg, University of Colorado, has joined the conference. And then finally, I'll showcase over here that we do have even more distractions. You can see I've got all my text chains up, and obviously as these texts are coming in, they're buzzing and beeping and going off, and again, distracting from the scene. So many things wrong with this picture. I didn't even mention the interviewee herself, who is not wearing a suit. She's looking a little bit frazzled. She's fresh out of bed. She's not ready to sign up for this job interview. So, what are we going to do next? I'm going to start with improvement strategy 1. We're going to talk about the settings, and I'm going to highlight that these settings are Zoom specific, but this is the platform we are using currently. If you are interviewing at other places and they use a different platform, the key is really to understand the platform, practice it, maybe set up a trial run with one of your friends so that you can understand those specific settings you might need to know about. So I'll draw your attention first to, again, my screen name and my profile picture. You do have the opportunity to put a profile picture up so that if anything were to go wrong, this picture would appear instead. You, of course, want to make this a professional photo, maybe not a picture of you out at the bar with your friends. So focus on a professional photo there. And again, think about your screen name. Perhaps instead of EMZ118, you can say who you are, say where you're from. That looks like a professional person who's ready to go. I'll bring you down next to the notifications. I have an Apple, but there are different ways to turn off your notifications so that you're not getting buzzes and beeps that there's the latest sale at the Gap, or that you just got a new text message, or new emails are flying in with COVID updates. So turn off your notifications for this time period. And then finally, I'll highlight over on the Zoom screen on my right, you have a mute option and a video option. Now, for most of these interviews, the goal is really to engage with you in as live a setting as possible. So in general, that video should be on and running so that you can engage in that conversation. Of course, you want to be able to quickly stop that video if a dog runs through the scene, a loud child appears, maybe the mailman knocks on the door and bops his head in. If there's some distraction, feel free to throw that on quickly. But in general, you should be keeping that on. Similar for the mute button. The goal of these is one-on-one conversations and have it as natural as possible. So usually mute isn't necessary, but let's say the fire alarm goes off, the delivery truck arrives and your dog goes crazy. That might be a time to quickly mute your scene. So a couple settings. We're going to move next to some settings around the video. So if you haven't noticed this in Zoom yet, there is a touch up my appearance button you can see there. This is kind of nice. It gives you the Hollywood glam look of just a little bit of airbrushing. Feel free to try it out. Never hurts to get a little bit of touch up. Try out with that setting and see if you like it and if it works well for you. Another option to do, I mentioned how energy depleting it is to have to look at yourself performing for an entire interview. So you can press those dots and hide yourself so that you're not looking at yourself participating in the interview the entire time. And then finally, under the mute settings, you can look at all of the settings for your microphone, and you should just be aware of what's available in terms of speakers, other speaker systems, in case you need to quickly troubleshoot and switch speakers if something stops working. And finally, before you start, you do have the opportunity to check your video, check your audio, and you'll get a confirmation that everything looks good. You'll do the thing where you look at your screen, make sure that you look appropriate. You'll get a ringtone, make sure you can hear the ringtone and the computer can hear you, and you can move forward. So do this a few minutes before. So that's improvement 1. Let's move on to the background. You might notice now that we're a few months into the Zoom world that people are getting really snazzy with their backgrounds. Sometimes they're in different cities, sometimes they're in Bali, sometimes they're in Hogwarts. Or this creative person actually put up a picture of her clean living room and felt like that was an appropriate way to look more professional. So what is the right background and how can you set yourself up for success there? Well, let's start here. This is the background that I'm currently sitting in and that I set up for most of my meetings. You can see it's a nice, clean, quiet space. There's minimal distractions. I have a comfortable place to sit, and I've hid the vodka, the booze, the dirty dishes, the concert posters, etc. So what did we do to make our background look like this? We're going to get through some other settings first, but I'll come back to some other strategies for how to do this in just one moment. So the third piece of advice is to find that quiet space. So maybe if you're home and you're worried about deliveries and dogs and children and roommates and family members, think about how to silence them, remove them, maybe come to work if there's an appropriate place where you can sit in an office. But knowing that the quiet piece is very important for these communications. One trick that I've learned along the way is that loud, clunky jewelry can be really, really clanky and loud and distracting during these conversations. Whereas in an in-person setting, you might look kind of cool and funky. On screen, it doesn't come off as well, and it might just be distracting. So put away all your jewels for these. Okay, so this coming back now to the position and the lighting. So this was a great editorial in Maureen Dowd's editorial section in the New York Times, as delivered by Tom Ford, the renowned fashion designer and producer as well. So he gave some very basic tips for how to look good on camera. First is that your camera should actually be at your head level. I think we've all noticed that in these meetings, many people are looking down and you just get a direct angle of many chins that you don't need to be seen. So think about how to prop yours up. You might have noticed in my last screen that my computer actually sits on a couple boxes of Kleenex. So consider how to do that. You also want to have the light coming from behind the screen. Ideally, there's a window or something next to you. You can see there's a window right here so that you can, again, highlight your face. People can actually see you. People actually recommend putting a white piece of paper underneath your computer. So again, the white light kind of bounces up. And of course, never forgetting to clean your camera so that you are nice and clear and in focus. Some really quick, easy tips there. So our scene right now is looking pretty good. You see distractions are gone, nice blank wall. Check, check, check. Unfortunately, we still have this hot mess to deal with. So what are we gonna do next to make ourselves a little bit more prepared? So some of you might have seen this headline. This was Will Reeves, who was on Good Morning America. You can see that he was really prepared for this. He put on his nice suit top and he was ready to go in his professional looking office to give his spiel about something about pharmacies and prescriptions. But when the camera actually panned out to move to the next story, they caught his upper thigh because he didn't seem to think it was necessary to put on pants or the full suit for his big TV encounter. So let's think about how to prepare ourselves. Step one, make sure you're wearing pants. What else can we do? So lots of things wrong with this picture. You can see in addition to the pajamas and general unprofessional look, there's distractions. She's picking up her phone to text. Now, of course, the camera is looking at you. If you were to pick up your phone, it seems obvious that we would know people are watching you do that text, but you would be surprised how often we forget because we're not in a live setting that we are doing it, that someone can see us. Of course, we would never dream of doing this in person, but think about, again, how to put all the distractions away so you're not even tempted. And then body language. So when you're in person with someone, you are very in tune to how you're portraying yourself, which can be much more difficult in a screen. So think about the normal presenting yourself with confidence, having a good posture, touching your face, generally never a good idea, particularly in the time of COVID. It just exudes a sense of, I'm not confident or engaged in this session. So many bad habits that we're showing off right here. Dress for the job you want, quite simply. It might feel silly to put on your suit in your bedroom or home office, but you gotta do it. So put on that suit, including the pants, and showcase your best self. You can see we're already looking much better here. So preparing ourselves, we're looking pretty good. You can see we've spiffed ourselves up quite a bit. We've spiffed up the background. What next? Now, the content of the interview. Now, this is certainly not new for virtual platforms, and it's also not rocket science. You all know, generally speaking, what you should be talking about and highlighting during your sessions with future job prospects. So let's talk a little bit more about what that content looks like. What is wrong with this picture? Hey, so what do you like about our program? Well, I'm very interested in learning more about the outstanding nephrology division at the University of Kidneys. Well, actually, this is the University of Lungs. So if you were to get on that plane and fly to San Francisco, you would be sure not to forget that you were at UCSF. You would be there live in action. You'd see signs everywhere, UCSF. You wouldn't have forgotten that plane ride you just took. But you can see when you're accepting quite a few different Zoom videos and Zoom interviews that you might get confused and just not realize that today is UCSF and in 2 hours it's actually University of Washington, and you might mix them up. So one tip that I have for this is to utilize your sticky notes. So think about putting sticky notes, just attaching them to the side of your computer. They might remind you of which program you're interviewing with, who the people are. You can write down their names. You might have specific questions you want to have at the ready. So put them out there, have them available so that if you just have a blank mind, you can all of a sudden just glance over, and actually this is a perk of Zoom. It won't look like you're shuffling through a notebook in person. So you can have that ready. So in general, this is not rocket science. This is what people want to know. Can you do the job that you're interviewing for? Are you likable? Do they want to hang out with you for many hours, a long call night, in the workroom, working on research together? And are there any risks? Is this person showing up as a potato? So what can we do to troubleshoot these areas? Not be a potato. Well, let's first think about your EQ. So your emotional quotient. So this is something that, of course, is a goal of interviews. People want to make sure, again, you're not risky, you're likable, and that they want to hang out with you and that you can do the job at hand. So these are the 5 areas of the EQ. Your motivation. So again, you're not getting on a plane to go across the country, so people don't have that inherent signal that you're motivated. How else might you show it? You want to be ready with those questions, those specific details about the program, the specific matchup of why your quality improvement scholarly work aligns well with their program and your future interests, or why your specific research background makes you a good fit for that fellowship because they have a specific mentor for you. So show your motivation in those ways, have those prompts ready. Self-awareness, so this is, again, knowing how you act in certain situations and being able to kind of regulate it, which is the next piece, and have an insight into how you behave. So these are the questions that people always get about how you behave in conflict, how you've worked in teams, how you've dealt with challenging situations. Think about those answers because they'll be of utmost importance to communicate in any interview setting. The regulation piece. So here's where Zoom gets tricky. We talked to a program that has been doing virtual interviewing for years, and they said that in up to 30%, if not more, of their interviews, there was technological issues, malfunctions. They highlighted that this was a problem, but they also acknowledged that it was actually really helpful because you could see how people behave in stressful, unexpected situations, which, surprise, surprise, is medicine. That's what we deal with all day long. So you can imagine if you were to lose your internet connection, or your computer dies, or there's a Zoom malfunction, it can be really stressful if you're interviewing for a job that you really want. Don't become that crazy person on the left, because that's not what they're looking for. They said that if you can really roll with the punches and show that you're flexible, you can handle stressors, you can quickly bounce back, you can troubleshoot on the fly, that actually shows far more, and there's generally no judgment against technological malfunctions. So think about that self-regulation piece. Empathy is, of course, important. And again, this is where you're going to be talking about patient communication, team communication. No particular tips here related to the virtual platform. But social skills, this is an interesting one. So let me bring you back to that comment about silence and the perception of unfriendliness. There are many normal, natural social skills in an in-person setting that can be masked or misinterpreted via a camera. So think about your pauses, your silences, how you might show up to, quote unquote, shake someone's hand. What can you do there to suggest, I'm here, I'm friendly, I'm excited to meet you. And again, my best piece of advice here is that for your mock interviews, you will be able to video them, and so that you can go back and look. What are my tics? What are the things I said that I didn't mean to say? How did this action or behavior come off and I didn't maybe want it to come off that way? So again, great time to interview and practice those interviewing skills. So finally, coming back to that idea that there will be tech malfunctions, how can we troubleshoot? Our final step in this process of preparing you for success. So you might see any one of these messages pop up. Zoom can't find your speaker. Nobody can hear you talking. All of a sudden, your video goes blurry. Maybe you're invited to the wrong Zoom session and nobody's there, nobody's available. The meeting times out and you get stopped mid-sentence. So what do you do when you encounter any of these problems? Well, generally speaking, you want to be prepared for the worst. So you want to have another device readily available, probably your phone. You want to have your charger there, maybe some headphones in case an unexpected noise pops up. Maybe you're jotting down the Zoom numbers and the login information on a piece of paper in case, again, something dies and you can't quickly click on it. Have a glass of water ready in case you get that tickle in your throat and you can't break the cough. So be prepared for the worst. Have all of your backups planned and ready to go. And when the worst inevitably happens, make sure you've established with your interviewee what is going to happen. So think about how powerful it would be if you started the interview with, before we start, I'd love to clarify how we should approach a tech malfunction or a dropped call. Who should initiate the callback? I think it shows that you have initiative and that you are concerned about tech malfunctions and that you want to be prepared. Again, all good qualities in medicine. So think about how to incorporate that naturally into a conversation. Alternately, if there's been someone who's been managing the setup of the interviews, the administrative piece, make sure you have their information handy so that you can quickly reach out to them. Okay, so with that, I will close this session. I want to leave you with the 4 objectives that we covered. So thinking about how you can best prepare the scene, which primarily means avoiding distractions. You want to prepare yourself, dress the part, put on your best self, and dress for the job that you want. Consider your content, which is really practice, 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 and figure out how to showcase all your amazing communication skills that you've built and highlight all the cool work that you've been doing for the last 3 years. And finally, be flexible. Flexibility is a fabulous quality in medicine, so think about how to be flexible in this new world of virtual interviewing, which none of us are terribly comfortable with. So with that, who would you like to be your doctor? I think it's an easy answer, and I think it didn't take too much work to get from left screen to right screen, so think about how to do that for yourselves. Finally, a few last tips and tricks that came from the group that I will share with you here. We do want to hear your own tips and tricks because, back to my first disclosure, I am by no means an expert at this. So if you have other things that have happened that you want to share, please do, and we'll make sure that it gets disseminated to the rest of your group. So with that, it is time to practice. Thank you for joining for this session. I hope it was helpful. Please do video yourself and go back and look and find out how you can be the best version of yourself. And with that, good luck. Thanks all.